Evil Dead Rise. Hey everybody, and welcome. Today we're going to be diving into the film Evil Dead Rise, a 2023 film directed by Lee Cronin, starring Lily Sullivan, Alyssa Sutherland, Gabrielle Eccles, Nell Fisher, and Morgan Davies, as they combat the Deadites in this reboot of the franchise. The opening scene thrusts us through extensive woods overlooking a vast lake, reminiscent of the original intro of the Evil Dead series. A force seems to approach a girl. It's Caleb, who startles Teresa with his drone. The two bicker, and we get to see just how nasty Caleb is. They discuss Jessica, his girlfriend, who is sick and recovering in a nearby cabin. He proclaims to have given her some meds to knock her out because he couldn't be bothered to deal with her. We cut to Teresa checking up on her cousin, but only to find her sound asleep. She tries to call out to her cousin in order to borrow her car to get away from Caleb, but to no avail. Thus, she proceeds to wait in a lounging chair as she reads instead, when suddenly, Jessica awakens and starts reading Teresa's book out loud without seeing the pages, her voice distorted and terrifying. Her cousin pleads with her to stop, giving her a disturbance as she does, passing out onto the floor. Her body begins to contort as her cousin checks on her when she is then attacked by her cousin, scalping her in the process, proclaiming the words,
"Who's the brainless meatball now?"
A wounded Teresa flees to the lake, Jessica in pursuit as she grabs hold of Caleb's drone, grimly gazing at Caleb as she strikes her face with the drone, plunging her into the lake. Caleb, alarmed, jumps into the lake to save her, but he is met with a grim fate as his severed head is thrown back ashore in a gruesome fashion. Jessica, emerging from the depths as she begins levitating above the area as the movie's title rolls. We flash back to one day earlier and introduce ourselves to Beth, a guitar artist, taking a pregnancy test. We then see Ellie, Beth's sister, living in a seedy apartment building with 3 kids. Bridget, the eldest, is an activist and a handful. Danny is an aspiring DJ, and Cassie, the youngest, likes decapitating her dolls and trolling her sister. Ellie struggles to handle the teenagers as they often quarrel, but deep inside, they're affectionate and caring. A doorbell at their residence goes off as Ellie checks who it is before she is spooked by Beth, who appears on Ellie's doorstep, surprising her sister. After a warm hug, Beth comments on the terrible state of the building. So, Ellie tells her that the entire complex will be knocked in soon, and they haven't found a place to stay. The kids are overjoyed to see their aunt. Beth tells them about avid fans in Bangkok and fun concerts. She notices Cassie's doll staff contraption, so Cassie explains that it's an idol to scare away the building ghost from the old days when it used to be a bank. A lady was killed because she stole from her employer. Beth offers Cassie a cool punk bracelet and says ghosts don't exist, which prompts Ellie to say, "Don't indoctrinate my kid into your groupie." Beth wonders where Jay, Ellie's husband, is because she has a gift for him as well. This subject sours the mood. Thus, she asks her kids to take her car out and go buy pizza as she and her sister speak privately. She informs her that Jay left them, and she doesn't know if he plans on paying child support. Beth blames her sister for not informing her because she could have helped. However, Ellie tried calling repeatedly, but Beth was probably being too rowdy between concerts. Beth apologizes, saying her job is time-consuming and she might become the first female music technician in such a prestigious position. They have an emotional sit-down and asks her to stay on the sofa tonight, promptly ending their conversation. We find Beth listening to the messages previously left by Ellie and apologizing, saying that she has made a mess of her life again and she needs Ellie's help. Suddenly, the apartment begins to shake and the sisters are forced to take refuge. As the kids return, Danny has trouble opening the parking lot in the rickety building using the beeper. When a sudden violent earthquake rocks the parking lot, the ground fissures, and the kids make a run for it seeking refuge by a nearby pillar of the building. Once it cools down, Danny snoops around and discovers a hole in the lot leading to the old bank. Against Bridget's advice, he slides down to explore. He finds the main vault and tons of paperwork. Then he comes across a safety deposit box with a picture of some priests. In the box, there are vinyl records that he bags. A giggle comes from behind him, so he turns to find a cross that nearly falls on top of him. Danny picks up the stuff and ventures deeper, finding a room with hundreds of crosses and coins dangling from the ceiling over an altar. Another quake occurs, cracking the altar, leading Danny to find a bag infested with bugs. Inside the bag lies a foreboding book. Beth and Ellie are frantic as they can't contact the kids. Ellie asks her neighbor Gabe to give her a ride to search for them, while an older neighbor asks if anyone has seen his cat lost in the old building vents. When the two talk, Beth gets called a groupie by the man, meaning Ellie had gossiped about her. The kids emerge from the elevator not too long after, and a relieved Ellie wraps them in a big hug, canceling the need to search for them. Back at home, Ellie begins packing their laundry, as they'll have to move soon. Danny and Bridget wonder how much this ancient tome is worth, as their mom needs the cash. The book refuses to open at first, but when Danny nicks his finger, the book absorbs droplets of his blood and insidiously opens. Inside it, they find pictures with mysterious symbols and horrifying pictures of rituals and violence. The drawings enthrall Danny. He leafs through them while Bridget is terrified. She says they have to give it back as there is something deeply disturbing about it. Danny promises to return it in the morning, but as soon as Bridget leaves, he goes back to reading. Beth prepares the tub for Cassie and pranks her by pretending a sea monster grabs her arm. Beth then gets a vicious stomach cramp, her newly found pregnancy rearing its symptomatic head. Danny continues reading, and worst of all, he plays the vinyl records he found in the priest box. The recording informs him about the clergy finding a book called Naturum Demento, the Book of the Dead, one of 3 tomes. The bindings are made of human flesh, and the passages are written with blood. The priest encounters an uproar from the church leaders calling for the burning of the book. The first record ends, so Danny plays the second vinyl, where he discovers that the priest and a few others were secretly translating the glyphs and incantations. They believe they can use the book to contact entities beyond our world, called Deadites. The priest reads the words, and his voice distorts. Danny tries to stop the recording, but he can't. It just plays on its own. The book flips to a page displaying a splayed woman, as if matching the recorded incantation. At the same time, Ellie is taking the laundry in the elevator. An unseen, invisible force begins traveling through the city as it finds itself back to the source of the book. Ellie, being its unwitting first victim, it rams into her, pins her against the wall, and levitates her. The elevator goes haywire and then crashes. Ellie awakens and calls for help, but no one hears her. She could feel a presence with her, something shoving her, speaking in tongues, and touching her hair. Ellie curses and screams for them to stop. In response, the elevator cords and cables wrap around her neck and hang her. She fights back, and her limbs get entangled as well. Her body stretches in different directions until she's completely immobilized, echoing the picture in the book. Back at the apartment, a blackout occurs. Bridget says it's just their building. With the power gone, Danny closes the book and stops the records. Beth and Cassie search for Ellie, but can't find her in her room. While Bridget is lighting candles and Danny is tinkering with the fuse box, Ellie opens the door and gingerly walks in. She enters the kitchen and throws eggs with their shells in the pan. She tells them a terrifying story about murdering her kids so she could be with them forever. She bursts into a cruel laugh and then suddenly contorts, telling Beth that it is inside her. Ellie crawls on the floor as the kids back away in fear. She profusely pukes and then tells Beth to stop them from taking her babies before passing out. Beth and Danny drag Ellie away, trying to take her to the hospital, but something is jamming the elevator door. They check the adjacent stairs, but also find the stairs demolished. With them stuck on the apartment floor, Ellie foams at the mouth until she seemingly dies. They put her in bed and ask Gabe and the old neighbor for help. Gabe closes Ellie's eyes, but they flip open on their own. He calls for prayer, despite her lack of faith in life, as her sister proclaims, and pays respects for her soul nonetheless. After praying, the old neighbor comments on Ellie's injuries, saying she looks as if someone beat her up. Beth and the neighbors discuss trying to find a way out, as the cell phone reception is also non-existent. Cassie is traumatized. She wants her father to return. Bridget tries to assuage her, while Danny sinks into deep blame. The scene shifts to Gabe and the neighbor trying to unlock an empty apartment as it has a fire escape, while Beth stays with her sister's corpse as she can't face the children. She confesses that Ellie always knew what to do and always made time for Beth despite everything she had faced. Instantly, Beth's phone plays Ellie's voice, and she's asking for help, saying she's burning alive. The screen cracks and the call ends. Ellie opens her eyes, stares at her sister, and then stands up. The kids are overjoyed that she's alive, but notice she's overheating. Thus, they take her to the tub to reduce her fever. She contorts in pain while being bathed before levitating to the ceiling. She crawls towards them and screams in a banshee's voice, shaking the house and cracking the mirror until she drops back in the tub. She slowly emerges from within as her nails wrap around the bowl, a sadistic smile greeting them as she tells Danny that his mommy is with the maggots now. They flee the bathroom, but Ellie follows with a mirror shard in her hand and slashes away at her sister. She stabs Beth in the hand, and Bridget momentarily stops her mom by screaming her name. Ellie moves towards Bridget, claiming she's now free of her parasite kids. She leaps onto Bridget, pinning her as she uses her tool to stab herself and then her daughter's cheek, mildly disfiguring and infecting her. Danny comes from behind with a chair and flings their mother off Bridget. Gabe, the neighbor, unluckily enters the home, confused at first, and before he can gather himself, Ellie vaults at Gabe, latched onto him like a parasite, forcing him outside the apartment. She bites his eye off as the neighbor's kids watch in horror, mouths wide open in shock, as Ellie spits the eyeball at another kid in the hallway, causing him to swallow it. Damn, that's gruesome. Beth uses the opportunity to lock and chain the door shut. Ellie bangs her head against the door menacingly, then stops and attacks the other neighbors. Beth watches in horror from the people as her deranged sister throws a boy against a wall and then kills Gabe. The old neighbor appears and shoots Ellie with a shotgun, but she survives, quickly murdering him shortly thereafter. She gives a harrowing look through the people, prompting Beth to open the window and scream for help, but no one can hear her from the downpour. Bridget realizes that her mother's demeanor and movement are similar to the pictures in Danny's book. She blames him for what has happened, and the two fight until Beth breaks them up, telling them not to turn on one another. Danny tells their aunt that he needs to show them something. Thus, Danny brings them to the Book of the Dead and says the priest's reading of the dark prayer on the vinyl afflicted his mother as they rummage through the pages. Cassie asks Bridget if her cheeks hurt. The older sister walks absent-mindedly, mimicking her mother, which terrifies Cassie. Bridget finds the wound on her cheek is festering quickly, and she hears a weird voice calling for her. The book flips to a page with a picture of a person bleeding from the face. Bridget begins profusely bleeding, just like in the picture. She tries drinking water, but ends up puking insects and vermin. On the outside, Ellie sings Cassie's favorite lullaby, forcing her daughter to come to the door. She says Jay is here, and they're going to stay together. They want to get into the house and be one big happy family. Cassie, through the people, proclaims her mother doesn't look so good. Her mother sang back, "It's nothing a big ol' hug can't fix," luring her daughter in closer as she unlocks the door. Instantly, Ellie reaches for her, strangling her as Beth and Danny fight off the demonic entity and close the door on Ellie and barricade it once more. Ellie makes fun of Beth by calling her a promiscuous groupie, so Beth snaps back and calls her a psycho behind the door. She puts Danny and Cassie in their room and then heads to the kitchen to check on the noise there. She finds Bridget in a demented state. Her eyes are filled with the same demonic hue Ellie has, eating a glass piece by piece. As she explains how she needs to kill the creepy crawlies inside her tummy, taking another bite of shards, swallowing it as they poke through her throat on its way down her esophagus. When suddenly Bridget spits on her aunt, then crawls to attack her. Beth kicks her away and throws objects at her. She catches them and uses the cheese grater on her aunt's calves instead, forcing Beth to smack her with a pot, stunning her. Danny appears, and the once floored Bridget springs back up and chases him back to the room. She charges at Cassie, who raises the broken broom handle to protect herself and inadvertently impales her sister, causing her sister to crumble to the floor, now seemingly dead. A petrified Cassie wonders if the same thing will happen to the rest of them, but Beth holds her, promising to never let that happen. Danny cautiously wraps his dead sister and ties her up, just in case. Beth and Danny seek aid and turn to the vinyls, seemingly their only hope for salvation. They rig up the turntable and get it in working order, as Beth decides to use the turntable to listen to the vinyl records. Danny has listened to the first two, which involved the possession, while the third includes the exorcisms. She uses a headset to shield the kids from the words. The priest says the book can't be destroyed, however, it can be buried somewhere away from sight. The demonic entities summoned are very powerful and resist prayers. The priest led his brothers to a woodshed and burned them all. At the same time, Bridget's foot twitches. Ellie notices a cat in the vents, grinning, and now having discovered a way inside the house. The apartment ceiling shakes, so Danny and Cassie track the sound, but out of nowhere, a draped Bridget appears and hovers toward Cassie. Danny protects his little sister and stabs Bridget with the kitchen knife. She is unfazed. She pulls the knife, stabs him in the arm and the chest, and then bleeds all over him, spreading the curse. Danny uses a spray bottle and the stove to burn Bridget to put her down. While Beth listens to the priest saying there is no way to stop the possessed, Ellie descends into the room. Beth notices the reflection in the window and arms herself. Ellie is mockingly tempering with the turntable, so Beth lunges and stabs her in the neck. Ellie responds by throwing Beth outside with ease, toying with her, where she finds a brutally wounded Danny uttering his final breath. He apologizes to Cassie before passing away. Ellie pins down Beth and chokes her. She realizes that she's pregnant. Ellie says she'll absorb 2 souls from one body. At that moment, Cassie slips her aunt a pair of scissors, which she uses to stab Ellie in the mouth and face, impairing her for the time being. Beth scrambles away, picks up Cassie, and moves to the entrance. She promises to get her out of there and asks that she obey her at all cost. Beth unchains the door, and they make their way to the abandoned apartment, noting all the carnage and the dead neighbors. Beth picks up a hammer and bangs at the lock until she staggers. She notices the neighbor's shotgun and some shells and picks them up. Before she can blast the lock, a recovered Ellie appears and flies toward Beth. She blasts her sister with the shotgun. Wounded, Ellie uses a kind and coaxing voice to manipulate Cassie, but this time, the girl says that her mom is long gone. Beth opens fire again, but the old neighbor, now cursed, grabs her leg and makes her hit Ellie's arm. The other neighbors awaken, now possessed by the demons. They all laugh in distorted voices, basking in the madness and chanting that everyone dies by dawn. Beth and Cassie flee to the elevator, whose door is jammed by Ellie's keys. Cassie retrieves the keys and the elevator lights up. Beth presses the buttons and it begins moving down. They're not out of the woods yet, as blood seeps from the buttons and the floor, filling up the elevator and almost drowning them. Ellie and the neighbors fuse, mirroring a fiend found in the book. They speak in unison and then head for the elevator. Beth grabs Cassie and climbs on the cords, but the blood pools around them. The top hatch opens and the fiend makes its way in. At a critical moment, the elevator doors open, flushing them out. Beth revives Cassie and they head to the parking lot, enter Ellie's car, and attempt to drive off. The beeper jams, stalling them, but Beth mashes the button till it opens the gate. She floors the car. Though the tires screech, the car doesn't move since it's stuck in the fissure. The Fiend emerges from the smoke, diving at them, but they leave the car and hide on the other side. The Fiend prowls around, but Beth evades it by tracking its movement from beneath the vehicle. Instantly, the gates begin to close. They sprint for the gate and slide under it, making it outside, but the Fiend grabs Cassie and drags her back in. It throws her in a lumberjack's pickup and grabs a chainsaw. A frenzied Beth kicks down a fence and barges back in. She makes it in the nick of time to blast the Fiend with the shotgun, allowing Cassie to hide. The Fiend throws the chainsaw at Beth, so she stumbles and the gun slides away. The Fiend drags her toward the wood chipper, nearly shredding her. As Beth nears ever closer to her doom, Cassie valiantly turns off the machine, allowing Beth to claim the chainsaw and massacre the Fiend. Beth tells Cass to turn on the wood chipper once more, pushing the Fiend in until Ellie is all that is left. Ellie begs for her life, but Beth does not relent. In her final words, she calls Beth a groupie until Beth kicks her head into the wood chipper. Realizing their ordeal is ultimately over, the two embrace and make their way out, but not before picking up the chainsaw, just in case. In the closing scene, it's dawn, and a woman on the first floor leaves her apartment and goes to the parking lot. She's inviting her cousin and boyfriend for a day at the lake. It's Jessica from the opening scene. She notices a pool of blood around the truck and goes to inspect it. In the last shot, the invisible force weaves through the lot and possesses Jessica as the film fades to black. If you enjoyed this video and found it entertaining, I encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching.